You know that feeling when you're sitting at your desk at work, staring at your screen, and it suddenly hits you. You're 34 years old, or 37, maybe 39, and somehow, without really noticing, an entire decade slipped past you. You were busy, you were working hard, you were doing all the things you were supposed to do. You got the job, maybe you got the promotion, you moved into a better place, you upgraded the car, you took the holidays, and yet somewhere in the back of your mind there's this quiet, uncomfortable feeling that won't go away, the feeling that financially you're not where you thought you'd be by now. Sound familiar? Here's what's interesting about that feeling. It's not random, it's not bad luck, and it's definitely not because you're bad with money. That feeling has a very specific cause, and once you understand what it is, the whole last decade suddenly makes a lot more sense. More importantly, the next decade can look completely different. If you've ever wondered why your 30s felt financially productive but your bank account tells a different story, make sure to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up if it ends up changing how you see things. Now, before we get into the actual mistake, and there is one specific mistake that shows up again and again in people's 30s, let me ask you something. When you imagine someone who's bad with money, what do you picture? Probably someone who blows their entire paycheck on takeaway and new trainers, someone who can't hold down a job, someone who never thinks about the future at all. But here's the thing. The people who make the biggest financial mistake of their 30s don't look anything like that. They're not reckless, they're not irresponsible, they're actually pretty sensible. They pay their bills on time. They're not drowning in credit card debt. They work hard and they have something to show for it. The mistake isn't obvious. That's exactly why it's so devastating. What is it? It's lifestyle creep. And before you roll your eyes because you've heard that term before, stay with me. Because what most people think lifestyle creep means and what it actually does to your financial future are two completely different things. And the gap between those two things is probably costing you hundreds of thousands of pounds over your lifetime. Here's how it starts. You're in your late 20s, maybe early 30s. You've been grinding, you've been careful with money because you had to be. You were earning less, your rent was taking up a huge chunk of your income, and you were living pretty lean. Then something changes, you get a promotion, you land a better job. Maybe your salary jumps from £32,000 to £45,000. Suddenly you've got room to breathe, and your brain quite reasonably decides you've earned it. So you move into a nicer flat, nothing crazy, just somewhere with a bit more space, a slightly better area, a gym in the building maybe. Your rent goes up by £400 a month. But that's fine because you're earning more now. Then you upgrade the car. Again, not a flashy move, just something newer, more reliable, something that doesn't embarrass you when you pull into the car park at work. That's another £350 a month. You start eating out more, not extravagantly, just regularly. Lunches that aren't packed from home, dinners out on weekends, a few nice bottles of wine because you're an adult now and you can. That's another £300 or £400 a month gone. Each of these decisions taken on its own makes complete sense. You're earning more. You deserve better. That's how it's supposed to work, right? But here's where it gets interesting. Every time your income goes up, your expenses follow it almost immediately. And sometimes your expenses outpace your income entirely. You're earning £13,000 more per year than you were 3 years ago, but you're somehow saving the same amount, or less. Your standard of living has risen significantly, but your financial position has barely moved. You've been running on a treadmill that keeps speeding up. You're working harder, earning more, spending more, and arriving at the same place. This is lifestyle creep. But here's the part that nobody explains properly. It's not the spending itself that destroys your financial future. It's the opportunity cost of that spending during the one decade when compound interest could have done the most work for you. Let me show you what I mean. Say you're 30 years old. You start investing £500 a month. You keep doing that consistently until you're 65. Assuming an average annual return of 7%, you'd end up with approximately £900,000. Not a bad retirement. Now say you wait until you're 40 to start. Same £500 a month, same 7% return, same consistency. By 65, you'd have around 405,000 pounds. Less than half. Same money, same discipline, same return, 10 years later.
That's the cost of lifestyle creep in your 30s. It's not the 400 pounds extra you're spending on rent. It's the compounding that never happened because that money was going somewhere else. Your 30s are the single most powerful decade for long-term wealth building. Not your 40s, not your 50s, your 30s. Because the money you invest at 30 has 35 years to grow. The money you invest at 40 has 25. That gap is enormous. And most people spend the most valuable investing decade of their lives upgrading their lifestyle instead. But here's where it gets really interesting. And this is something that will probably surprise you. Lifestyle creep doesn't just cost you money. It rewires how you think about money. Every time you upgrade your standard of living, you reset your baseline. What felt like a luxury 6 months ago now feels like a necessity. That 15-pound lunch that used to feel indulgent now just feels like lunch. The 1,200-pound rent that felt like a stretch when you first signed the lease now feels completely normal. The 400 pounds monthly car payment that made you slightly nervous the day you drove it off the lot now barely registers. Psychologists call this hedonic adaptation. Your brain adapts to every new level of comfort remarkably quickly. Within a few months, what used to feel good just feels normal, and normal doesn't feel like anything. So you start looking for the next upgrade, the slightly bigger flat, the slightly newer car, the slightly nicer holidays. The cycle repeats. And here's the cruel part. You never actually feel wealthier. You just feel like your current level of spending is what's required to live a normal life. The person earning 30,000 pounds and the person earning 70,000 pounds often report similar levels of financial stress because their expenses have grown to meet their income at every stage. This is why salary increases alone will never solve a money problem. I've seen people get a 10,000-pound pay rise and be no better off 6 months later. Not because they went on a spending spree, just because their life quietly expanded to fill the new space. Now, you might be thinking, I get it. Spend less, save more. I've heard this before. But here's what most personal finance content gets completely wrong about this problem. It's not really about discipline. The people who fall into lifestyle creep in their 30s are not undisciplined. In fact, they're often the opposite. They've worked hard for their money. They've delayed a lot of gratification in their 20s. And now, in their 30s, they feel like it's finally their turn to enjoy the results. And that feeling is completely reasonable. The problem isn't that they're spending. The problem is that nobody ever showed them how to structure the spending so it doesn't cannibalize their future. Here's what actually works. And it's simpler than most people expect. It's called paying yourself first. And before you dismiss that as basic advice you've already heard, let me explain exactly how it applies to your 30s specifically. Every time your income increases, whether that's a pay rise, a bonus, a new job, a side income, you split the increase before your lifestyle has a chance to absorb it. You automate a meaningful portion of that increase directly into investments before it ever touches your current account. Your lifestyle can still improve. You just don't let it improve by the full amount of the increase. Say you get a 5,000-pound pay rise. Before your brain has time to decide that you now deserve a nicer car and a better flat, you increase your monthly investment contribution by 200 pounds. That's 2,400 pounds a year going to your future. The remaining increase, around 2,600 pounds, can absolutely go toward enjoying your life more. You're not living like a monk. You're just making sure your future gets a cut before your lifestyle does. The key word is automate. You don't want this to be a decision you make every month, because every month there will be something more immediately satisfying to spend that money on. The automation removes willpower from the equation entirely. But there's another layer to this that most people never consider. Lifestyle creep in your 30s isn't just about the money leaving your account. It's about the identity shift that happens when your standard of living rises. Once you've lived in the nicer area, driving the newer car, going to the better restaurants, going back feels like failure. Your new baseline becomes your minimum acceptable standard, and protecting that standard starts to drive financial decisions in ways you're not even fully conscious of. This is why people stay in jobs they hate for longer than they should, because they've built a lifestyle that requires a certain income to maintain, and walking away from that income feels terrifying. The lifestyle that was supposed to give them freedom has actually become a trap. Here's something that might genuinely shock you. The people who feel the most financially free in their 40s and 50s are almost never the people who earned the most in their 30s. They're the people who kept a meaningful gap between what they earned and what they spent. Not because they were miserable and depriving themselves, because they understood that the gap between income and expenses is the only number that actually matters. That gap is where wealth is built. Everything else is noise. Let's talk about another version of this mistake that hits differently, but comes from exactly the same place. Social spending. Your 30s are the decade when social pressure around money is at its absolute peak. Your friends are getting married, hen do's and stag do's that cost £500 a head, weddings abroad, baby showers, housewarmings, weekend trips to celebrate someone's 30th, someone's 35th, someone's promotion. And because everyone around you is apparently earning more and spending more, you feel the pressure to keep up. This isn't just lifestyle creep at the individual level, it's lifestyle creep at the social level. Your peer group raises the floor for what counts as normal spending. And because nobody talks openly about money, you have no idea that half the people in that WhatsApp group are quietly stressed about the same weekend away that they enthusiastically agreed to go on. The financial damage from social spending in your 30s isn't just the money itself. It's the fact that it's almost impossible to say no to without feeling like you're either poor or antisocial. So people say yes. They put it on a card. They tell themselves they'll sort it out next month. And next month, there's something else. Here's what I want you to understand about all of this. The biggest financial mistake people make in their 30s isn't any single purchase. It's not the car. It's not the flat. It's not the wedding abroad they can't really afford. It's the accumulation of dozens of individually defensible decisions that collectively prevent them from building any real financial foundation during the decade when it matters most. Every one of those decisions makes sense in isolation. Together, they add up to a decade of missed compounding. And missed compounding in your 30s is the most expensive thing you will ever not buy. Now here's something I want you to really sit with. There's nothing wrong with enjoying your money. That's not what this is about. The goal isn't to white-knuckle your way through your 30s eating rice and refusing to go on holiday. The goal is to make deliberate choices about where your money goes instead of letting your lifestyle make those choices for you. Because here's the difference between someone who arrives at 40 with solid financial foundations and someone who arrives at 40 starting from scratch. It's not talent. It's not luck. It's not even income. It's intention. The person with solid foundations didn't earn more. They just decided early in the decade that their future would get paid before their lifestyle. They automated that decision so they couldn't talk themselves out of it. And they let compound interest do the heavy lifting while they went on with their life. The person starting from scratch made a series of completely understandable decisions, each one logical on its own, that collectively meant their money never had a chance to grow. They didn't blow it all. They just spent it. quietly, reasonably, every single month. The scariest part? They often have very little to show for the spending either. Not because they were reckless, but because most lifestyle creep spending doesn't create lasting value. The nicer flat you can barely remember. The car that's already been traded in. The dinners and weekends away that blur into each other. The money is gone, but the experiences have faded. Meanwhile, the money that was invested at 30 is still there. Growing. Quietly. Without needing any attention. There's one more thing I want to address, because I know what some of you are thinking right now. You're thinking it's too late. You're 36, 38, 42, and this is making you feel sick, because you recognize yourself in everything I've just described, and you feel like the damage is already done. It's not too late. Yes, the most powerful compounding window is your 30s, but the second most powerful window is right now. Whatever age you are. The best time to start was 10 years ago. The second best time is today. Because 10 years from now, you will look back at this moment the same way you're currently looking back at your 30s. And the question is whether you're going to feel the same thing or something different. Here's what I want you to do. This week. Not next month. This week. Look at what's happened to your expenses every time your income has gone up over the last 5 years. Be honest with yourself. Work out the gap between what you earn and what you invest. If that gap hasn't grown proportionally with your income, you've experienced lifestyle creep, and now you know what to do about it.
Set up an automatic transfer into an investment account that happens the day your pay arrives, before you see it, before your brain decides what it needs. Start with whatever you can. Increase it every time your income goes up. Keep the gap growing. That's it. That's the whole strategy. Your 30s might already be behind you, but your financial future isn't. The person you'll be in 10 years is being built right now by the decisions you make this week. Make sure they thank you for it.